as I said, we lived in the lower part of Colville Street. We were very fortunate, I suppose, because we had two close families living with us. Almost next door to where we lived, we had my father's parents. They lived there, and then at the top of Colville Street into St George's Terrace, my mother's parents lived there at number 14 St George's Terrace. Now, we didn't seem to see, for some reason, didn't seem to me to see a lot of my father's parents. We caught up with them, we met his sisters, his in-laws, but we didn't seem to spend a lot of time with him. Whereas with my mother's family, we seemed to be with them a lot. Now, whether that had to do with personalities or whether it had to do with the general thought that the girls seemed to stick close to their mothers, again, I don't know. But I even noticed it a little bit with our own family sometimes. Anyhow, we seem to go to a lot of places with my mother's family. I can recall going to visit them of a night and then being tired and being carried home down the street and put to bed. As an indication of the area and the era, I can remember coming down the street, being carried down, the light switched on in the room, and the floor absolutely covered with cockroaches, all scuttling almost instantly straight back underneath the stove to get the warmth that they needed to keep alive. And I can still see that, just an amazing sight. So I can remember then we would visit them up at their home. We would then go on picnics with them. Picnics were simple ones and cheap ones, of course. A walk to the waterworks. Now that seems, when I look at it today, it seems a long walk, but it didn't seem a problem. We walked from home, end of Colville Street, St George's Terrace, down Sandy Bay, and probably up King Street, and then down to Waterworks and up the road, Waterworks Road, and we would have a lovely picnic up there and come back. We would also, of course, catch the tram to Sandy Bay Beach. We loved a day at Sandy Bay Beach. A very simple one, naturally. Walk down over the hill to Short Beach. Although I was told to try and keep away from that dirty creek, and that was what we call now the Sandy Bay Rivulet. But the areas around were nice and simple to get to and easy to play with. Bellerive was another place that we really enjoyed because it was simply a matter of walking down over the hill, getting a ferry, the Derwent or the Rosny, across the river, and then a simple walk over the hill and you're on Bellerive Beach. So that was, quite a pleasant way of having a relaxing time of a Sunday. And I think that was something my parents needed as much as anything. That would have had a fairly difficult time. I think I mentioned, of course, that the houses that we lived in, and possibly 75% of the houses on Battery Point, were all owned by people who didn't live in the area, and they were all rented out. They were all fairly basic. Very little work was done on the maintenance of them. I've mentioned the toilet facilities. Washing facilities were always very, very basic. Just before we moved from number 5 Colville into number 7, my mother would have to stoke the fire up, put a small can of water on to get it very hot, tip it into a bath or a basin, and then get ready to wash the children. Now, I remember standing on the table with my father washing me when I was very young, and he'd stand me in a small basin of water, exactly the right temperature, and then say, now, you know how we do this, I'll wash up as far as possible, and then I'll wash down as far as possible, and then when all that's done, I'll wash possible. And so as a youngster, I really loved that when he'd say that. The houses were extremely basic. The ones that I started to talk about in number 5 and number 7 Colville virtually had no electrics. There was one light fitting hanging from the centre of the room, and if you wanted anything else, even to run the radio, there was what we called the double adapter that clipped into that. An electric light globe came on one side of that, and then a plug went into the other side, much the same as the 3-pin plug we have now. When you recall it, it was incredibly dangerous to think that these electrics were just handled so carelessly at that time. With the electrics, of course, while I was still quite young, I'm talking about maybe 7 or 8, radios were just coming in, and the popularity of them was great, but they were too expensive for most people. But luckily we had an uncle, Dad had a brother-in-law who was skilled in the manufacture of radios, small radios. So he made one for us, and the thing was small enough, I suppose, not like a small mobile one now, but small enough to put on a shelf. They had to be registered, naturally, with the authorities, but we managed to put it on the shelf, run power from the centre light down to it, had the thing sitting behind a curtain, so I don't know how we covered the lead running from the centre light, but had one sitting there, and I used to stand on the arm of a chair and listen to my very favourite shows like Dad and Dave and Yes What, a school story joke. And so that used to be a very favourite way. I think during the day my mother used to listen to some of her favourite shows too. You could hear it around the room, but of course if I wanted to listen to Yes What, the others in the room would want to listen to that probably, so that's why I put my head under the curtain and just loved standing there listening to it.